Buonasera, ben trovati a tutti. Just few words in Italian, then we start talking English for our guests, for Professor Claudia Yaghoobi. Good evening, Shabe Khosh, Alessandra. Questa sera in prima fila, brava Adria dalla Svizzera. Buonasera a tutti, bentornati. Francesco, buonasera a tutti quanti. So che il tema di questa sera interessa molti. Soltanto un paio, just a few questions, a few things about next conversation, next live streams. Tomorrow at 7, quindi alle 7, non vi sbagliate, non alle 9 come al solito, avremo un'altra diretta, l'ultima prima di Pasqua, in vista della giornata di Ottar, che è il 14. Noi la celebriamo il 13 con gli amici dell'Istituto Culturale e con la dottoressa Savina Zanardo, dottore di ricerca in studi iranici. Questo sarà il tema di domani. Il tema, Masira Franco, intanto, il tema di questa sera lo conoscete già tutti. Abbiamo con noi un ospite dalla North Carolina, quindi diamo il benvenuto. Welcome to Claudia Yaghoobi. Khosh amadid.
Merci, kheli mamnoon. Thank you so much for inviting me. Hi, everybody. I'm happy to be here.
Oh, we are happy to have you here. So we have also great news because you became just a few days ago Director of Persian Studies, inaugural Director of Persian Studies on the University of North Carolina, isn't it?
Well, that was last year. Recently, I will be the incoming director of the Center of the Middle East.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Something more. I'm sorry. A mistake. I heard about a big news, but I didn't find it. So
it's okay.
Congratulations.
It starts in July.
Okay. Also, welcome Claudia, Cameron, Canazade. Salutiamo. So this evening we talk about your work, your book, Temporary Marriage in Iran, Gender and Body Politics in Modern Iran Film and Literature. So as I said, this is a topic, this is something that in a lot of live streaming and a lot of interviews and books in Italy, we love very much talk about temporary marriage. You know that for Italian traveler or maybe an Italian curious, a lot of people even could say, "Oh, lucky you that you have a temporary marriage." It is something very weird, but maybe it's something very, I don't know, folkloric, maybe something very strange and funny. But we know that the story is something really different. So the first thing that I like to ask you, and then we have a conversation also with our friend if they have something to ask. The rules of this institute of temporary marriage is we can say that this is an Iranian institute or not?
Well, in Iran, under the Iranian civil law, there are two recognized types of marriages. One is the nikah marriage or the formal marriage, and the other one is sighe or temporary marriage, and in Arabic it's called mut'ah. The basis for nikah marriage, which is socially and culturally more superior to sighe marriages, temporary marriages, is that the couple are supposed to marry permanently, and the purpose of that marriage is basically establishing a family and having children and procreation. However, in sighe marriages, temporary marriages, which are similar to a contract where you decide about the duration of the marriage and the financial exchange, that the man is supposed to pay some specific amount of money to the woman by the end of the contract, by the end of that duration they agree upon. The purpose of this kind of marriage is not necessarily, family establishment or children, but it is mostly for gratification of sexual desires. if you're talking about the sexual type of sighe, because sighe has different types, and Dr. Shahla Haeri in her book Law of Desire has talked about all these types. There are non-sexual types of sighe, and there are sexual types of sighe. And in the sexual type, usually the purpose is the gratification of sexual desire, particularly for the man. But regarding the roots of sighe marriage, basically sighe is this tradition that predates Islam, which means that, and it has been in the Arabian Peninsula before Islam, which means that even pre-Islamic Persian Empire, we had sighe and temporary marriages at that time too. They might not have been called sighe specifically, but that type of, exchange and marriages and kinds of unions were there before that, which basically means that sighe is not an Islamic or religious practice, but rather a more cultural practice, cultural institution. It is only after the Islamic Revolution, with the Islamic Republic endorsing it, that it's become very, religiously endorsed. But it is a practice that is, being used in today's Iran by the Iranian 12er Shiites. In Sunni communities, we also have, different types of unions, which are similar to sighe that is being practiced in Iran, because Iran is majority Shiite country. And because sighe is being practiced by Shiite communities, it is predominantly in Iran that we see the practice. But in Sunni communities also, we do have similar unions, which are called, for example, Orfi or Mesyar, which are common law unions, common law practice marriages. After the 1979 revolution, some of the Sunni clerics began making Orfi marriages more legitimate and religiously endorsed. And the Mesyar type of the, Sunni temporary marriage or Sunni Mesyar unions are practiced mostly in the Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, and they're also religiously sanctioned and very popular amongst the migrant workers in the Gulf region. But they are very much like sex tourism. They also have the involvement of underage girls. So basically, both Sunnis and Shiites have different variations of the practice, which is temporary unions, but they are not necessarily called sighe. In Sunni communities, because the second Caliph Omar had banned it, it was for a while banned, but Shiites decided that, it was optional and non-binding, so they didn't conform to the second Caliph's forbidding of temporary marriages at the time. Then there are differences between nikah marriages and sighe marriages, and one of the most important things is the duration, right? It's on the title, temporary. Yeah. So the couple basically decide at the time of the initial agreement, they decide how long they're going to be married, and by the time that time ends, the duration that they have agreed upon, it ends. They are done. There is no formal divorce. And then because there is this exchange, the financial exchange that they agree also at the initial agreement time, the contract time, that kind of settlement, or which is called ajr, when the man pays that financial settlement, that's the end of the union. But the couple can also decide to renew it. Mm-hmm. So it's also renewable. And they can also decide to turn it into permanent or formal nikah marriage. So that's also something else. And then there is, there's no alimony in sighe marriages. There's no nafaqeh. There's no inheritance for the wife in sighe marriages, but for children, if there is any child out of sighe marriages, temporary marriages, there is inheritance if the father accepts paternity. And then there is also this period of abstinence or ada that the woman has to keep, which is 2 menstrual cycles or 45 days. But in nikah marriages, in formal marriages, this is 3 cycles. Now, this is for the making sure about paternity if there is any pregnancy and children out of those marriages. Yeah, so those are some of the basic like roots and differences between nikah and sighe. But I'm happy to talk about different types of sighe also.
Okay, oh please, because it's very interesting. But you say after Iranian Revolution, in Iran they started to talk about from a religious point of view. But how much the Jang-e Tamili, the Iran-Iraq war, influenced this matter? I mean, about it was only a matter about widows, about so many Iranian women that became widowed after the war or during the war.
Yes, exactly. You know what I noticed? I think this will be interesting for Italian people. I have a little Italian too. I use my hands a lot.
Ah, really?
When I talk, I'm used to using my hands.
Yeah, you are Armenian.
Yes,
it's true. Yes, yeah, you're Armenian. Just because your family name, your Yaghoobi, it reminds me a famous novel, Palazzo Yaghoubian, that Egyptian novelist. That is really an amazing novel, and it's a very common family name for Armenian, isn't it? Yaghoubi, no.
Yeah, it's more so Arabic. In Armenian, the translation is Hakupian.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, but Yaghoubi is Yaqub, which is Jacob.
Okay.
The Arabic Yaghoubi. But going back to your question, so yes, after the Islamic revolution, sighe was basically encouraged by the state, and during the public, Friday prayers in the public, they used that platform. The clerics used the platform to endorse it and to encourage people, the youth, to contract sighe marriages. And it was presented as savab, or heavenly reward, and also as a means for controlling sexual and social disorder in country. But during and after the Iran-Iraq war, the president of the time, that was Hashemi Rafsanjani, promoted sighe as a means to solve the socioeconomic problems of war widows. Because a lot of men who went to the war and were martyred and killed or became veterans and could not financially provide for their families, then we had all these women without male guardians. So they needed socioeconomic help, basically. So this means that, women for whom their best option was like sighe were those who were from the lower socioeconomic strata of the country, those who were from the working class, or those who didn't have other resources financially needed to get into these types of marriages, sighe marriages, so that they could provide for their families. And these were also either divorced or widowed women, which is very common amongst widowed and divorced women, because of the importance of virginity at the time of marriage in Iran. the women who are not
Still a
married.
stigma, yeah, yes, for women, and so many men didn't like to marry a non-virgin woman.
Yes, exactly. And the women who want to get married for the first time, preferably they don't contract sigé marriages. They prefer to get into a nikah marriage, the formal marriage,
Sure.
because of that reason. But after, in 1990s, for example, things began changing in Iran, and we see a lot of, young women starting to use sigé to their own benefit. And many of them, this is during the, reconstruction period, Jahad Sazandegi, after the Iraq-Iran war.
Sure.
And because this is a time period when financially the country is trying to establish itself and stand upon its feet, and the communities, the society, people are also trying to financially thrive. So a lot of women are using sigé marriages with men who are affiliated with the state, so that they can have this social mobility, so that
Yeah.
these men can provide them with luxurious lives. So that's very interesting. And then later on, the Islamic Republic also introduced this type of marriage, which temporary marriage, which is called trial marriage, and that was for it was like a stand-in for Western type of dating, but it was kind of legitimized through the state and religion. So we have many young people who want to get married formally, but they do want to know each other before getting married.
Yeah.
So they contract trial marriage. And then later on in 2000s, we have the young people again using temporary marriage to their own benefit for Western dating, for circumventing the morality guard, saying that, oh, we do have, we are connected, we are, married.
Sorry if I interrupt you, but I remember first time I went to Iran. It was 2005, and a lot of young people used to talk about Sige very, very friendly. They say there is a website. It was Sige.ir. It was C, just like the number 30, and some boys and girls were used to try to find people. I mean, it was just like very first kind of social,
Yeah.
a kind of social media.
Exactly. It's like, Western type of dating, but
Yeah.
using what the tools that the state has provided, so manipulating what they have to their own benefit, which is smart.
Yeah, it was so strange to me because in 2005 we didn't have yet in Italy Facebook or things like Tinder or something like that, and so it was very strange because it was some Islamic institution that online used to talk about these matters, these kind of things, temporary marriages, and so on, and it was quite a shock for me. But just turning back to your book, you wrote that Rafsanjani was also the first president. He was a Hojatul Islam, so a clergyman, a religious man. He was trying to justify, to explain this phenomena from a religious point of view. It was quite interesting. He said something that. It was a protection for female body.
Yeah, it's not protection, it's policing. It means like regulating, controlling
Okay.
the female body. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my argument in the book, that in different ways the state, the religion, the government, the culture, all these different institutions that we have in society, they are doing different things to basically discipline, control, regulate female desire, female sexuality, female body. And we had so many examples in the cultural productions which show that.
So if in fact you use an image very, very strong that I underline, you say that Vatan, the nation, is a female that needs an efficient guardian, a male guardian. And in every books that you talk about or movie, there is always an image like this. And I can even try to not see that all these books, all these movies are all by men.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I have written about that in the introduction and in the conclusion, actually. Yeah, there was, I had a hard time finding works written by women that were discussing Sire marriages extensively that I could use to basically talk about them in one chapter. Yes, women have referred to Sire very briefly in here and there in their books, but it wasn't that much for the purposes of my work. I couldn't use them, which I had a hard time coming in terms with the fact that I'm using all men's works to talk about female body. But I did mention that in the conclusion and introduction as well. In terms of, I think the question of Vatan that you mentioned, that is actually not my idea. I would like to give credit to, I was using a quote from Dr. Najmabadi's work, Afsane Najmabadi's work, Women Without Mustaches, Women with Mustaches, I think. Where she argues that at this specific time and period after the Qajar era, before Reza Shah, we have this time period where we don't have efficient guardians of the country, efficient rulers of the country. So the country needs a guardian, and that's I used her argument to expand it and use it for my argument in the book, by saying that yes, the for example in Masumeh Shirazi, the chapter on Jamalzade's Masumeh Shirazi, or the chapter about Moshfegh Kazemi's Tehran Makhuf, we do see specifically in Moshfegh Kazemi's book, we do see this exactly happening, that the Qajar dynasty falls apart, and then we have Reza Shah Reza Khan at the time coming to throne, or to power, and then the officials in the country, the law enforcement, the politics, everything is struggling, and that kind of struggling is like mired in corruption. The country is drowning in corruption, and that kind of corruption is not just sexual corruption, but financial and all sorts, like cultural, social, and political. And that is beautifully represented in the reflected in the novel, that's mapped out on the female body. The women characters that we have in the book suffer the most because of everything that's happening in the country, and that the men are using all those things happening to their own advantage and sacrificing the women of the country. That's in Tehran Makhuf.
Tehran Makhuf, we can translate horrible Tehran, something like that. Tehran Makhuf.
Horrible Tehran, or it's been also translated as horrid Tehran.
Horrid Tehran.
It's by Moshfegh Kazemi.
I didn't read it because I don't. We don't have an Italian translation. But for all these books, we just a few months ago we have this is from Sadek Chubak and from the very our friends Giacomo Longhi that translated the title is in Farsi. Just help me.
Is that Sabur?
Sangue Sabur.
Sangue Sabur.
Sangue Sabur. I didn't find the name. And when we talk about that book, we see that it was very, very strong as a Iranian book. And I'd like to know if all these book you talk about, just like Masume Shirazi or Teran Mahfouz, which kind of destiny they had in Islamic Republic? They are banned, or people can read them? Because Sangue Sabur is officially forbidden, then people used to read it.
I mean, I don't think you can find these books in the bookstores in Iran.
Okay.
I personally had a hard time finding copies of them, here. And also I hired research assistants in Iran to do some research in the National Archives for me. So there is a huge silence about, Sighe marriages in the way that is different from the way that the state is endorsing it. You don't want that kind of sighe, because there are sighe, novels and stories which are basically, conforming to what the government, the Islamic Republic, wants you to know. But what I wanted to focus on was not the propaganda type of sighe, but the more kind of impartial representation of sighe. I don't think you can find these works. Neither of the works that I use, none of them, you can find in the bookstores, but you can definitely find them in black market. And some of them are actually available online.
Online, I think, yeah.
Download the PDFs.
PDF.
Do believe that I bought the Tehran Mahfouz on Fidibo, I think, at the time when I was working on this book 10 years ago, I think I bought it back then. Also, a couple of universities in the US the libraries have the copies of these books. And then even the films, about Zendegi Khususi and
Zendegi Khususi, yeah.
Both of them have been, banned. They haven't been. They were screened for a very brief time period,
for a brief time,
and then they were taken down.
So let's jump to the movie Zendegi Khususi. It is a film by Mohammad Hossein Farakbash, 2011. It was at the 2012 Film Faj Festival. And I was there. I was in Tehran. And so, it was very strange because I didn't want to shoot this film. I don't remember the title of the other film I like to see, but then I chose this one. I entered in this theater. It was crowded, full of people. And for me, it's something very strange because it was just like to be in a stadium with people, with clapping hands when one character says something or something other. And it was quite shocking because, well, we can talk about the end. It is a violent, very violent conclusion.
Yes.
And it was quite strange for Iranian cinema, for the other Iranian movies I saw before. And then just to talk about it, but the film was at the Faj Festival. Then after 1 or 2 weeks, they decided to remove it, to censor this movie.
They banned it.
They banned it, yeah. Some weeks later, a delegation from the cultural ministry, the Iranian cultural ministry, arrived in Rome, and we had a conversation. And I asked to the vice minister, why did you retire? Why did you ban this movie after you proposed it at the Fudge Festival? And he said, I disagree with this decision about to ban this movie, but maybe we didn't understand it before. We didn't understand the movie. So it was a very Iranian situation. Yeah. So, for our friends that maybe don't know what we are talking about, this movie is on YouTube. So I post now the link, and it is in Persian with the English subtitles, so you can see it. It's the entire movie, the full movie. So
yeah, it's interesting that at the beginning of the movie, it starts with a line from Nahj al-Balagha, from Imam Ali's Nahj al-Balagha, the peak of eloquence, the title of the book by Imam Ali. And it is basically talking about, don't be a hypocrite, don't try to manipulate or use religious justifications for your corruption, don't tell people what to do and not to do. And all those, what we call in Persian amrona, like do this, that, don't do this, don't do that. And then we see that the main protagonist of the film, ends up doing all those things.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting, ironical that we have this statement at the beginning. And it's also interesting because we have similar statement at the beginning of the Masume Shirazi. There are a couple of lines of poetry from Omar Khayyam talking about, the sheikhs and clerics who are hypocrites.
Yeah, in that book, there is a very violent scene of the violence that the poor girl suffered from a clerical man, for a very important clerical man. In this movie, is interesting how the main character, from being a radical Islamist, becomes a reformist and
Yes.
a modern one, and someone who said that women are owners of their bodies and so on, and so westernized life with his house and so on. But then
yeah, the film shows exactly the limits of liberalism in the reformists, right? This group of extremist Islamists who have changed into reformists in 2010s, and they claim that they support women's rights and women own their bodies and this and that. When it comes to the point where their reputation, their formal marriage, in this film, is in danger, and there is the woman is a threat to his reputation in society, then that female body must be eliminated. The same women own their bodies. Now he owns the body, so he decides to murder her. So he has,
a very fascinating character, this Parisa, that
yes.
just come back from United Kingdom. She's young. She's a Bachehaye Engelob. She's a child of the revolution. It's the third generation. And while the main character is older than her, and he was a veteran from the Janghe Tamili and the revolution, and so it's really interesting, this relationship. But in a while, it is a comedy, and I remember people were laughing about some scenes, when they went to the house empty, and then it was the, for me, wonderful image when they turn out the lights and we saw it from the street. This is very Persian.
Yeah, it's, it is very Persian representation of what's
Yeah,
happening in the bedroom.
sex. Yeah,
On the screen symbolically.
yeah, really, really. But
But
then
those are
it just
things.
became.
Those are things that when I teach Iranian cinema, and if I'm teaching a film like that, I have to explain for my students what's going on.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they don't know.
You know that Rakshan Bani Etemad
Yeah.
some years ago went to Rome and have a lesson here. And she said, due to censorship, due to the Islamic Republic rules, Iranian cinema is swimming in an ocean of passion without getting wet.
Yeah.
This is wonderful. This is also very Persian.
Very beautifully said.
She's great. Rakshan Bani Etemad, for us, it was a very important filmmaker, and I think a very strong woman in cultural Iran. I mean, and turning back to the movie, this story is very bad, horrible story, a murder. But it was also an omen of what happened some years later in Tehran from the former mayor of Tehran.
Yeah.
It's incredible, but it was the same story.
It's a story that happens probably every day in Iran.
Yeah.
And we have so many. I mean, even when I was finishing, the book was going into production, then we had the story of Najafi. And, I was asked to add a prologue at the beginning to discuss what's happening with, Najafi's story and how my book is related to that. So the topic of female body, these murders, I discuss them in terms of sighe marriages, but that can be discussed in generally, not just in sighe marriages, for women generally. And that the political figures, these religious figures that are manipulating these relationships, specifically in the book with sighe marriages, and then murdering or killing or getting rid of these women who become threats because they are pregnant and they are, threat to the reputation of this man. So they have to get rid of the woman. It is not something new, and it's not something that has ended or just begun with my book or this film or ended with it. I mean, even, recently we had examples of that. And while I was finishing the book, we had another example. It's just on a daily basis, you hear the news that it's all these things are happening. And then the things that we hear are happening are the things that are about like high profile political figures. Maybe we're hearing what's happening to ordinary, the relationships between ordinary men and women being killed there. Those are things that we don't hear.
Things in every day in Italy too. In Italy too, we have almost a woman killed every day, and 90% of these cases, it is the husband. The killer is the husband or the fiancé or the former husband or something like this. This is the reality is this. He's just maybe it's not an Islamic problem. It's nothing like an issue. We have this kind of particular institute, Sige, in Iran, but maybe it's a reflection of relationships between men and women in
exactly.
the world.
So I'm editing a volume on Iran's Me Too, the sexual harassment, rape, and sexual violence. And the research shows that, the percentage of sexual harassment, the domestic violence, the, intimate relationship violences, and all those things are approximately the same as what we see globally, which is 30%. So this is not a specific, maybe as you said, Sire is Iran specific, but what's happening, in the relationships is not Iranian phenomena or Iran specific.
Yeah, and the first chapter you talk about the reform family protection law that started in 2007 and became law in 2013, maybe. It was a very important fight for Iranian women.
Well, that part, what I described there and what I was discussing was about the temporary marriage or sire marriage, and that was Article 22 in family protection law, which was being, the government had proposed some changes to it. And what the change was basically removing the registration of sire. And when you remove the registration of sire, basically you remove the legal rights of the woman and if there is any child. So in the cases of for example, Parisa in the film that we see, there is no registration. The couple just agree verbally. That's why when Parisa is killed, there is no legal consequences. That's why when Parisa is pregnant, he doesn't have to accept that paternity. But when there is registration, then, they have to basically be, the man is accountable.
Yeah.
Right? Now, in this, the change that they did and became law, the proposal was removing the requirement to register. So today, the registration is not required, but if you decide to register, you can do so.
Okay. This is interesting. It is a long way from the the beginning of the 20th century with the first novel you talk about and the 1922, because the first novel was published in 1922, and then the last movie is just 10 years ago, something like that.
I cover
100 years of secret. Yeah, but this is a long way.
Yeah, and by the way, the paperback of the book is available now, and it's with discount, 20% discount, I think.
Oh, so you have to buy, dear friends. You have to buy this book because it's really interesting. You find it everywhere, also on Amazon, on Kindle as a book, and it's really it's a very great work. I mean,
thank you.
It's a great work and a long work. How many years did you work on it?
The total number of years from the day I began until its publication was 10 years.
And it's also an interesting guide to Iranian books, to Iranian novels, because we like to discover authors and books. And thanks to your book, I discovered 3 or 4 novels that I have to confess I didn't know. And
well, thank you for reading my book.
Oh, no, thanks to you. And this book, Tehran and Mahfouz, is really fascinating me. It's something like, I don't know if you said that there's something like The Great Expectation by Charles Dickens. This town, this is Tehran, and it's also Tehran in the movie, in Zendegi Kosusi. This a dirty, great, chaotic.
Yeah. And by the way, it's written by Moshfegh Kazemi, Morteza Moshfegh Kazemi, not Masoumeh Shirazi.
Oh, Masoumeh Shirazi is the It's the character of the I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm
Exactly.
sorry, so sorry. I have to correct it. Yeah. This is Masume Shirazi is a very sad story. From your pages is very, 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 very sad. This poor girl lost her parents during the travel to Mashhad.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean,
Iranian
it was.
novels are not so happy. Maybe are often very sad.
I mean, working on Sire marriages and all these women being murdered is depressing, right?
Oh yeah, sure.
I had to work for 10 years and then I have to discuss them and talk about them. And I mean, we are joking and laughing now, but
No.
usually, usually when I give talks, I'm very serious because it's a very serious topic. And, these women have been murdered because of just wanting to be married.
No, sure. Just a joke about this kind of mood, but no, it's not
No,
nothing to laugh about. I
no,
agree with you.
I
But
know you're okay. This is a different,
situation.
environment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's something that we'd like to end our conversation. You know that in your book you didn't talk about sex district in whole Tehran, Calais, but just to see some images. This is from Golestan, Calais, Golestan, and then there is a movie very famous documentary by Kamran Shirdel that we talk about in other live streaming. But how we are in Catholic Italy, in Catholic Rome, and I think it's better that we don't have a sex district here in Italy. I don't sincerely. I don't feel this less. But how can an Islamic country as a pre-revolutionary Iran had a sex district in the capital? This was not always a fight with religious institutions.
Yeah, and so we don't have the sex district was called Shahreno. So we
Shereno.
don't have Shahreno after the Islamic Republic,
Sure.
obviously, because that was first on their agenda to purify the country of all, that sort of quote unquote wise.
They light a fire immediately, and they kill a lot of women that were living there.
Yes, arrested, imprisoned, and many of them were actually part of their rehabilitation was becoming Sire wives of these
Okay.
the veterans or the Pastaran or Basij or those members. But before Islamic revolution, we did have both Sire for the part of the country that believed in the religious sabab of it, and then we also had the red light district in Tehran specifically, where we had the brothels, for example. However, I have to say that the Shahrano or this red light district was outside of Tehran, like the capital, and it was kind of a colony of itself, secluded, kind of isolated and secluded. So that I think the geography or the location kind of the red light district speaks volumes to the fact that it
Okay.
is not integrated in the society, so it's not accepted. It is kind of, far away,
Something
isolated.
separated, isolated from the town. I see. I understand. So I think we are at the end of our conversation. I don't know if our friends some question. Christina said, "Such a lovely guest. Thanks for talking about this interesting subject." Christina loves Iran very much, speaks Persian perfectly, and is in love with Iranian cinema. She was also an actress for Jafar Panahi. For a little year old, yeah.
My favorite director.
It's a great director. We have spent a lot of time talking about his movies, and we hope to see new Jafar Panahi's movies very soon.
I love his work. He is my favorite. Thank you, Christina, for being here.
Just a personal question about cinema. Did you see that movie that went to Venice Festival last year, Janayat Bidagat, by Mokri?
I have not.
Because it's something that is cinema inside cinema, and is something also about the Rex theater fire in 1978. And it's, for me, it's a great movie. It's a very, very good movie. It's something.
But that's also a technique. Cinema inside cinema.
Yeah.
Is a technique that we've had with Kiarostami. Yeah.
Kiarostami was the master, maybe, of this technique. It was, but Mokri is this quite young director. He shot a movie some years ago, Cat and Fish. That it was a long sequence, just one sequence for 2 hours, and it's very, very. For me, it's a genius. It's the new Iranian genius of cinema. I mean, thank you for this informative talk. I learned much from the book. Dice il nostro amico.
This is my good friend. Yeah, he's my good friend, Mahdi. Thank you, Mahdi Jan, for being here. He's already read the book. Thanks so much.
So, please.
And hello, I wanted to tell you that, you're talking about Attar tomorrow. My first book was on Attar too.
Attar, oh, I saw it. It was a coincidence, but there is no.
So tomorrow is Attar Day. I had no idea because I moved from that book.
Yeah, it's just a circle, It's
it comes back.
And then we have to talk about Attar tomorrow, and then
very nice.
Very, very, very nice for us to talk with you today. So, dear friends, go to Amazon or wherever you want and find this book and buy it, because it deserves. It is very, very interesting. So, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Next time, maybe we have a Persian conversation. Our friend said, I didn't speak Farad. Our friend, I didn't speak English, and so goodbye. I have to go. I'm sorry, but we cannot speak in 2 or 3 languages. It's too complicated. Farad is a good friend, and he lives in Rome. And he wrote books about revolution, about poetry. He's a special friend of us.
Wonderful.
Good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Iranian community and program and everything.
Yeah, this is Iranian and Iranophile community. We started during the pandemic, during the first lockdown here in Italy. And we have a lot of friends that see us live, or then listen to podcast, or see video back the day after the live streaming. So we are a group of people that loves Iran, love Iranian culture, poetry, and movie, and Persian language. So
wonderful.
Here we are.
That is great.
Hope to see you again. Thank you so much for your book,
for
coming here tonight, and I will send you then the podcast and the link to YouTube tomorrow.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.
Night, good afternoon. بعد از ظهر بخیر و خسته نباشید.
خداحافظ. ممنون. خداحافظ.
Buonasera a tutti, noi ci vediamo domani sera con chi verrà per parlare di Attar. Buonasera a tutti.